Okay, so we're diving deep today into one of Voyager's weirdest encounters, and I mean, this one is seriously out there.
Absolutely. And it all starts with a pretty routine mission. Voyager's charting this section of space near a protostar.
Protostar meaning basically a baby star just starting to form.
Yeah, exactly. And usually these things, they're fascinating to study, but they're not exactly known for being action-packed.
Until now.
Until now, this protostar starts exhibiting this crazy, intense photonic activity.
Yeah, it's like suddenly this stellar nursery is putting on a laser light show, and nobody knows why.
And that right there, that's what caught Voyager's attention. Yeah. I mean, imagine you're on this starship exploring the vastness of space, and suddenly your sensors pick up this anomaly.
You have to check it out, right?
Oh, absolutely. A phenomenon like that demands investigation.
Yeah.
And of course, being the intrepid explorers they are, Janeway and her crew, they change course to get a closer look.
And thankfully, we have the ship's logs and even some dialogue recordings to really piece together what happened next.
We're talking first-hand accounts direct from the source. It's like having a front-row seat to this cosmic mystery.
So first things first, Janeway sends Torres and an away team to beam aboard some samples of this photonic matter, which, by the way, is described in the logs as this glowing orange gas. I mean, how cool is that?
It's an intriguing detail for sure, and it hints at the exotic nature of this energy we're dealing with.
But right off the bat, there's a little hiccup.
Oh, right, the containment issue.
Yeah, they're trying to beam this stuff into these special units, with annular confinement beams to hold it all nice and secure, but one of the units doesn't fill properly.
And initially, they chalk it up to a minor technical glitch with the beam itself.
Which, in the grand scheme of things, it seems like a pretty small detail, right?
On the surface, sure, but looking back, it's almost like a subtle foreshadowing, a hint that this photonic matter isn't going to behave as expected.
And that this little hiccup is just the beginning of a whole lot of weirdness. Now Janeway, she's no dummy. She's thinking, if they can figure out how this photonic stuff works, it could be a game changer for Voyager.
The logs even mention a potential boost to power converter efficiency, something like 15 to 20%.
Which, in terms of Starship operations, is huge, right?
Absolutely. A jump like that would revolutionize their energy capabilities, extend their mission capabilities dramatically.
Yeah, they could go further, explore more, all thanks to this weird orange gas.
It's the kind of discovery that deep space explorers dream of.
But before they can even start celebrating this potential breakthrough, things take a very strange and unsettling turn.
I believe you're referring to Ensign Kim's disappearance.
Yeah, 1 minute he's there, the next poof gone, vanished without a trace.
And not just gone missing in the conventional sense. There's no record of him using the transporter, no shuttlecraft activity all accounted for.
It's like he just stepped out of reality.
And adding to the strangeness, his last known location was holodeck 2.
But when they try to scan the holodeck, they're hit with this wall of interference. It's like trying to see through a blizzard.
And they can't shut down the program remotely, either. Something seriously interfering with the holodeck systems.
So Chakotay and Tuvok, they decide, okay, let's go in and figure this out firsthand.
A logical course of action, given the circumstances, but what they find inside is anything but ordinary.
Right, they beam into this active holonovel based on the epic poem Beowulf.
Now, I imagine some of our listeners might not be familiar with Beowulf, so just to give a bit of context.
Yeah, it's basically this ancient story about a hero battling monsters in 6th century Denmark. It's full of swords and mythical creatures and good versus evil, all that epic stuff.
A classic tale of heroism and adventure.
But what Chakotay and Tuvok encounter isn't some harmless reenactment right away. They notice something's off.
The holodeck is running, there are characters moving around, talking, interacting, but Tuvok's tricorder, it's not picking up any life signs.
Which is super creepy, right? Like you're surrounded by these seemingly living beings, but they're not registering as alive.
And it gets weirder. They try a basic system command, something simple like deleting one of the characters.
Yeah, you'd think that would be easy peasy in a holodeck program.
You would, but the command, it just fails. Nothing happens. The character remains.
And to top it all off, the safety protocols, the things that are supposed to prevent anyone from getting hurt in the holodeck, they're offline.
Which means whatever's happening, it's not just a glitch. This is a full-blown system malfunction and a potentially dangerous one.
Then they encounter one of the holo characters, this woman named Freya, who's described as a shield maiden.
A warrior, in essence, strong and capable.
Yeah, and get this. She's aware that she's in a program called Beowulf. Like, she knows she's not real.
Self-aware holo characters, that's not exactly standard programming.
Nope, not at all. And it gets even stranger because Freya, she starts talking about this other character, Beowulf, and her description of him, it sounded a lot like Ensign Kim.
So now we have this unsettling possibility that somehow Kim's identity or at least some aspect of it, has become entangled with this holonovel.
And then Freya, she drops this bombshell. She tells him that Beowulf is dead, killed by a monster named Grendel, and now everyone's out to avenge him.
So Chakotay and Tuvok, they went into this holodeck to find a missing crewman. And now they're caught up in this virtual revenge plot.
And it's all starting to feel a little too real.
The lines between simulation and reality are blurring.
Freya leads them to the Great Hall, where they meet King Hrothgar, who's basically the ruler of this whole virtual Denmark.
He's depicted as being weary and troubled, plagued by these ongoing attacks by Grendel.
Yeah, and there's this other character, Unferth, who's immediately hostile towards Chakotay and Tuvok. He doesn't trust them one bit.
So not only are they dealing with this malfunctioning holodeck, but now they've got interpersonal conflicts to navigate within the program itself.
It's like they've stumbled into some weird interactive play where the stakes are getting higher by the minute.
And they still have no idea what happened to Ensign Kim.
Right, so they start asking around about Beowulf's death, trying to get some clues, but nobody actually saw the battle, and the body is gone.
Which deepens the mystery even further. What really happened to Beowulf in this program, and is it connected to Kim's disappearance?
Unferth, meanwhile, he's not making things any easier. He demands that Chakotay and Tuvok prove their worth before he'll even consider helping them.
He's suspicious of their motives and their sudden appearance in his world.
So while all this is happening back on the bridge, Chakotay's reporting everything to Janeway, telling her about these holo-characters, claiming that Kim is dead, and Tuvok confirms that the safety protocols are still offline.
And Janeway, she's understandably concerned. She orders a full diagnostic of the holodeck and wants to see those tricorder readings ASAP.
She's starting to realize that this isn't just a typical holodeck malfunction. Something far stranger is going on.
Absolutely. She's a seasoned captain. She knows when things are truly amiss.
Back in virtual Denmark, Chakotay and Tuvok, they locate the primary imaging matrix of the holodeck program.
The heart of the simulation, in a sense.
Yeah, and while they're there, Chakotay, he makes this interesting observation about the cultural significance of monsters, how they often represent our deepest fears, the things that we're afraid to confront in ourselves.
It's a thought-provoking point, and it makes you wonder what kind of fears might be manifesting in this malfunctioning holodeck program.
Tuvok, being a Vulcan, he doesn't really buy into the whole monster as metaphor thing. He points out that Vulcan mythology doesn't really have those kinds of creatures.
Which highlights the contrast between their two cultures. The human tendency towards symbolism and the Vulcan emphasis on logic and rationality.
But all that cultural analysis gets put on hold when the bridge team makes a major discovery. The tricorder scans from the holodeck, they're showing traces of photonic energy, the same stuff they collected from the protostar.
Which immediately raises the question, how did it get there?
And Torres, she figures it out. Remember that little containment issue they had during the initial beam-in of the protostar samples?
It seems that tiny breach in the annular confinement beam wasn't so insignificant after all.
Yeah, some of that photonic energy must have leaked into the transporter system and spread from there.
And now it's somehow found its way into the holodeck.
Which leads Tuvok to put forward this really unsettling theory.
You're talking about the matter conversion nodes.
Yeah, what if those nodes, the things that convert energy into matter to create the holographic environment, what if they got contaminated by this photonic energy?
And if that happened, and Ensign Kim was in the holodeck when it occurred?
He might have undergone matter conversion, accidentally been turned into pure energy?
It's a terrifying thought, and it hinges on the fact that the holodeck, it operates on principles similar to transporter technology.
Right. It's constantly converting energy into matter and vice versa to create those realistic environments.
But it's not supposed to do that to living beings.
Obviously.
And so the possibility arises that this photonic energy, it's somehow disrupting that delicate process with potentially disastrous results.
And as if to confirm their worst fears, this unidentified object suddenly materializes in the holodeck. It's about a meter across, and they suspect it's Grendel, the monster everyone's been talking about.
The very creature that supposedly killed Beowulf, who might actually be Ensign Kim.
It's all starting to feel very, very real.
The stakes are escalating rapidly.
They know they have to investigate this Grendel thing, but before they can, the bridge detects massive amounts of matter-energy conversion happening inside the holodeck.
Look like the system is going haywire.
Janeway immediately orders an emergency transport to beam Chakotay and Tuvok out, but they can't get a stable lock on them.
The photonic energy, it seems, is interfering with the transporter signal.
And then there's this burst of bright light, and their life signs just vanish, gone.
It's a devastating loss, and it confirms the extreme danger posed by this uncontrolled matter-energy conversion.
Torres analyzes the garbled sensor data from the holodeck, and she comes to the conclusion that it was a cascade failure in those matter conversion nodes.
Triggered by the photonic energy contamination.
Exactly. It caused Chakotay and Tuvok to be completely dematerialized.
The tragic consequence of this unprecedented chain of events.
But Paris, he refuses to give up hope.
He always was the optimist.
He suggests that maybe their molecular patterns, their essence in a way, might still be trapped within the holodeck matrix.
It's a long shot. But given the circumstances, even the most improbable scenarios have to be considered.
And he comes up with this really bold idea. Send the doctor into the holodeck.
The emergency medical hologram.
Yeah, because he's not a physical being, right? He's made of energy, so he can't be dematerialized by the photonic energy.
It's a clever workaround, exploiting the doctor's unique nature.
But the doctor, well, he's never been on an away mission before.
Understandably, he's a bit apprehensive.
He's a doctor, not an explorer, and he's never even seen a real sky, let alone ancient Denmark.
It's a big step outside his comfort zone.
Keyes tries to encourage him. She suggests that he choose a name, to feel more like a Starfleet officer.
It's a way of giving him a sense of identity and purpose in this unfamiliar situation.
He thinks about it for a bit, considers a few options, but then he hesitates. He says something about a painful association.
It's an intriguing detail
Yeah.
that makes you wonder what kind of experience could have left such a strong negative impression on him.
They modify his program a bit, give him more control over his magnetic containment field so he can solidify or become intangible at will, and then they beam him into the Beowulf program.
And he chooses the name Schweitzer,
Yeah, for now at least.
and almost immediately he runs into Freya.
Who's pretty surprised to see him, especially since he seems to know an awful lot about her and the whole Beowulf story.
He's done his research, and it gives him a distinct advantage in this situation.
It's like he's walked into this ancient world armed with a cheat sheet.
In a way, yes, his knowledge of the narrative gives him insights that the other characters lack.
He even manages to save Freya from accidentally poisoning herself with a mushroom she was going to use in a pre-battle tonic.
The mushroom in question being Amanita muscaria, highly poisonous.
But the doctor, he recognizes it right away thanks to his vast medical database.
It's a perfect example of his expertise coming in handy in an unexpected way.
Freya's definitely impressed. She starts calling him Lord Schweitzer and treating him with a lot more respect.
He's quickly gaining a reputation as someone who's knowledgeable and trustworthy.
When he finally reaches the Great Hall, he announces that he's going to wait for Grendel, which immediately raises Unferth's suspicions.
Unferth's distrust of outsiders is deeply ingrained,
Yeah, and he challenges the doctor to a fight.
which ends rather anticlimactically because Unferth's sword, it just passes right through the doctor.
Yeah, you can't really stab a hologram.
And Unferth ends up awkwardly injuring himself in the process, much to the amusement of the other Danes.
They're completely flabbergasted by this display of apparent invulnerability.
It's like they've never seen anything like it.
They start hailing the doctor as their new champion, the one who cannot be harmed.
It's a classic case of misinterpreting advanced technology as something magical or supernatural.
And the doctor, he just rolls with it.
He's a quick learner, adapting to the situation as best he can.
Hrothgar invites him to a feast and asks him to tell them stories of his homeland.
Unferth naturally wants to hear about his great battles.
But the doctor, he launches into this detailed account of how he successfully contained a measles outbreak.
Not exactly the kind of heroic tale they were expecting.
Over the next few hours, Hrothgar shows the doctor around his kingdom. Unferth continues to grumble, and Freya, she has this really heartfelt conversation with the doctor about the fear and despair that's gripping their world.
It's a moment of vulnerability and connection that reveals the depth of her character,
And then she kisses him.
which I have to admit is a bit unexpected,
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's some real chemistry developing between them.
even in this simulated world.
But then suddenly the doctor, he senses that photonic energy again, the same stuff that's been causing all this trouble.
The threat hasn't passed.
It manifests right there in the Great Hall. This tendril of orange light wraps around his arm.
And he immediately calls for an emergency transport.
He makes it back to sickbay, but he's missing an arm.
It seems the photonic energy somehow disrupted his magnetic containment field.
And it gets worse. Analysis of his tricorder reading shows that there are synaptic patterns within the photonic energy itself, like it's exhibiting signs of neural activity.
Which implies that this isn't just some random energy phenomenon. It might actually be an intelligent life form.
Torres and Paris, they try to replicate those synaptic patterns in their contained sample of photonic energy back in engineering.
It's a risky move, but they need to understand what they're dealing with.
And they're successful for a moment. These complex patterns emerge on their monitors, and then the contained energy, it just vanishes.
It escapes the containment field and starts moving through the ship.
And not just randomly, it's moving with purpose, avoiding any attempts to recapture it.
It's learning, adapting, reacting to its environment.
They realize that this is not just some stray energy. This is an intelligent being with a neural network.
And it's heading for the outer hull.
Janeway makes a quick decision. She tells them to let it go as long as it doesn't threaten any critical systems.
A bold move, but perhaps the only option given the circumstances.
The energy being, it leaves the ship, and then this massive photonic lattice appears in space.
Like a giant energy structure.
And the smaller energy being that escaped from engineering it merges with this lattice.
Like a drop of water rejoining the ocean.
And then they detect 3 distinct bioelectrical patterns emanating from within the lattice.
Patterns that don't match anything else in the lattice, but they do have biological components.
And Janeway, she puts it all together. She realizes those 3 bioelectrical patterns, those are Kim and Tuvok.
Their life essence, their neural patterns, somehow integrated with this photonic life form.
Her theory is that these photonic beings, they come from the protostar. They were inadvertently captured and experimented on. And this whole thing with the holodeck and taking the crew hostage, it was their way of retaliating.
It's like an interspecies misunderstanding gone horribly wrong.
The first contact scenario that nobody could have predicted.
And it raises all sorts of questions about how we approach encounters with unknown life forms.
Especially when those life forms are so fundamentally different from anything we've ever encountered before.
It challenges our assumptions about intelligence, about consciousness, about what it means to be alive.
The doctor, he comes up with a plan. He suggests that they return the remaining photonic energy that they have contained as a gesture of goodwill.
A peace offering.
Exactly. He wants to go back into the Beowulf program and release the energy to Grendel, who seems to be the key figure in all of this.
It's a risky plan, but it might be their only chance to get their crewmates back.
And the doctor, he feels responsible. He wants to finish what he started.
Despite the risks, despite his previous experience in the holodeck.
So they beam him back in. He tries to explain everything to Freya, and Unferth, he offers them the container of photonic energy as a talisman.
But Unferth, he's still suspicious. He refuses to believe the doctor's story.
Yeah, he thinks the doctor is in league with Grendel, and he attacks him.
Freya jumps in to protect the doctor, and in the ensuing struggle, she's fatally wounded.
It's a tragic moment, a reminder that even in a simulated world, actions have consequences.
And Freya's final words, they're incredibly poignant. She calls the doctor by the name he chose, Schweitzer.
The name that he'd been hesitant to use because of some painful association.
Now we understand why.
He's devastated, but he knows he has to complete the mission. He goes back to the Great Hall, confronts Unferth, retrieves the container from Hrothgar, and then he releases the photonic energy back into the holodeck,
allowing it to rejoin the larger photonic lattice.
And then the most amazing thing happens. The photonic lattice outside Voyager, it reappears. There's this massive particle surge detected coming from the holodeck, and Kim and Tuvok, they rematerialize on the holodeck floor.
They're back safe and sound.
It's a happy ending, but it leaves you with so many questions.
Absolutely. It challenges our understanding of reality, of the nature of life itself.
The doctor, he wonders if the photonic beings understood his intentions or if they simply reacted to his actions.
Did they even perceive him as an individual or just as an extension of the technology?
Janeway, she sees the whole thing as this bizarre form of first contact, a conflict, a desperate attempt at communication, and ultimately a kind of peace treaty.
A treaty forged not through words, but through actions and sacrifice.
She even puts a formal commendation in the ship's logs for the doctor's actions. She wants to cite him by his chosen name, but when she asks him if he's settled on one, he hesitates.
The memory of Freya's dying words is still too painful.
It's a bittersweet reminder that even in the midst of triumph, there can be loss.
And that the journey of exploration, it's not without its costs.
Janeway and the doctor, they both have this feeling that this won't be his last adventure.
Which makes you wonder what other strange and wondrous encounters await them out there in the vastness of space.
So for all of you listening, I leave you with this question. What does it truly mean to make contact with a completely alien life form, especially when that contact is unintentional and fraught with danger? How do our assumptions and our cultural frameworks shape our understanding of such encounters? And how can we prepare for interactions with intelligences that are so fundamentally different from our own life? What unexpected paths might lead to understanding or even peace in such situations? It's something to think about as we continue to explore the universe and all its mysteries.
It's a journey filled with both wonder and trepidation. and one that we're only beginning to understand.
Thanks for listening.
Live long and prosper.